WCLN 1170 Radio and Cable Channel 16 are pleased to present We Should Know, hosted by J.W. Simmons, an upbeat, informative look at people, places, and issues facing our community. This education-based analysis of issues will remain positive and informative as we consider closely what we should know.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. We Should Know is on there. I want to remind you our email address is weshouldknow@gmail.com. weshouldknow@gmail.com. Also, we'll remind you each and every Tuesday at 2:30 we come to you with a show, hopefully with some information, education, things that you need to know more about or that you have heard about, and maybe bring a little more in-depth perspective to it. This week we're doing exactly that, and we're talking about January being Human Trafficking Month, and we have two people that have backgrounds in that. First is Beverly Weeks. Beverly is a trained biblical counselor and is an ordained minister. She's an author, international speaker. She's the executive director of Wayne Pregnancy Center and Cry Freedom Ministries. And Jonathan Chavous is he actually holds a lot of work in nonprofit, and since 1999 he's traveled literally all over the world, has a degree in ministry, leadership, and pastoral studies. He's the Chief Operating Officer at Wayne Pregnancy Center and Cry Freedom Missions. Folks, thank you for being with us. We want to talk a bit today about the whole world of, we've seen so much on media called human trafficking. Prior to coming on, off air, we were just kind of chatting about things. There's a lot of pieces to that, is there not? And there's a lot of things that we say, wow, that would never happen to my family or anyone I know. Beverly, you can kind of debunk some of those ideas pretty quick, can you not?
Yes, so human trafficking is a $150 billion industry right now, second only to drugs. Let me put it to you this way. You can sell a bag of drugs just one time, but you can sell a young girl or a young guy over and over and over again.
And I think for a lot of the issues that we see with human trafficking, people see the movies Taken, and they see those type of things happening overseas. And that was for me as well. I was overseas doing work in the Philippines, throughout Asia, and Japan, China, India. And so, I didn't think it was going on here to the degree that it was. But when I came back about 3 years ago and began to work with Cry Freedom and Wayne Pregnancy Center, I was shocked at the level that it was happening in our backyard. Literally down the road from us, across the street, in middle-class neighborhoods, upper-class neighborhoods, in your lower-class neighborhoods. There was no real division as far as, it's just happening to this group of people. It's happening across the board. I think that was the shocking thing for me. And I was an individual who was working in trafficking for, since 2008. I'd had an encounter. I was in Peru doing a leadership conference. And the gentleman that I was with, we shut the door to a nice 5-star hotel. And on the back of the door was an infant with a circle around it and a dash through it. It said, "No sex with infants." And I can remember just the level of grief and shock all at the same time. And me and him talked about it for a few minutes, like this can't be a reality. That I can't even believe that's a thing. And so I kind of dismissed it. Maybe that was something that really wrong in the culture. Maybe that was something that just happened there in Lima, and thought it was just something, an enormity. But then I went to Tokyo. It was about 6 months later in a totally different area, different hotel chain, the exact same sign. And it was at that point that I knew that I couldn't ignore what I was seeing. And so we had developed an organization called Hope for All Children, and we began to work with rescuing kids. And we've got actually a rescue home in the Philippines for children, for girls that are 15 and younger. And the shocking reality that we found was there were even children being trafficked at birth. And so when I came back home, I thought I'd left that world, so to speak. And there at the Pregnancy Center, we began to see things that made us very aware that it's happening here in our area.
Beverly, some of the things that you guys are going to cover today is going to be shocking to a lot of people.
That's right.
And it's also going to be like, they're probably going to have trouble processing it.
Yes.
Did that happen to you in the beginning stages?
Most definitely. So we're not here to alarm anyone, but what we are to do is to wake up, to bring awareness. Jonathan and I sat in a lot of meetings with city council members, with people within our community. What we saw, what got us drawn into the sex trafficking or the human trafficking side is we saw women that would come into the pregnancy center to get pregnancy tests, and there's pregnancy centers all over North Carolina. You know, one in mostly every major city, but we saw women coming in to get pregnancy tests, and they would never have any ID on them. They would sometimes be brought in by another gentleman, and they would be reserved or regarded as to what they could say. And so actually I offered to take one of the young women home that day and give her a ride. And when I did, I remember distinctly walking into a hotel that day. And what I saw, for me, it changed everything. I walked into a room and I met the sweetest young girl, and just for today, we'll call her Amy, and I began to build a relationship with her, establish a relationship, because we know it's all about relationships, building relationships with these people so they, these girls and these guys, so that they can trust you to give information to you. And I met her, Amy, that day, and she shared with me how she had been prostituted by her mother at the young age of 7. She had been prostituting her since age 7 because the mother had a drug addiction. And so if that is the only lifestyle you have ever known, how would they know any different if we don't show them? And what happened for Jonathan and I is we were sitting in meetings after meetings after meetings across North Carolina, because right now our state has the 10th highest reported numbers for human trafficking and sex trafficking. Well, we would travel all across the state and we would hear people talk about sex education and training, which is very much needed. Awareness is key. But nobody was rescuing. Nobody was saying, I'll put my life on the line, I'll go out in the middle of the night, we will go out, we will build relationships with these men and these women, and we will actually offer to do rescues.
And I think part of the reason that people do that is it's just so easy to go to your church, to go to your workplace, to go hang out with your friends, and we just turn a blind eye to the things that we see on the side of the road. You know, there's certain just neighborhoods we just don't go through. There's certain areas that are known for prostitution. There's certain places that we just don't frequent, and so it's just out of mind, out of sight. You know, we're just going to stay away from it. And our thing was we cannot ignore what we've already seen, because many of those girls that were coming in the pregnancy center, we knew something was really wrong because they couldn't tell you where they lived. They didn't have any IDs. They couldn't tell you where they were coming from. And what we discovered, that there were people coming in and out of our region, and they were being trafficked from Miami all the way up into New York. And here in North Carolina, Eastern North Carolina was a central location for the halfway point to stop. And we're far enough off of 95 and far enough off of 40 that the FBI wouldn't run stings that deep. And so they would put in local communities like here at Clinton. They would do it in there in Goldsboro, different places such as Greenville and Wilson County and so forth. So they would put these girls in these different hotels, and we're seeing anywhere from 40 to 50 girls brought into our communities, every other month, different girls that would come through. And then of course we're offering free services, free pregnancy tests, free ultrasounds, helping them get resources that they need. And so they would come over there to us because the pimp and the trafficker, they're not wanting to spend anything on this girl.
Yeah, it was a natural place to go.
Yes,
exactly.
yes.
And so when we began to see this, we knew we had to do something beyond just the free pregnancy test and just beyond, because these people, many of them, were stuck in a lifestyle that they had not chosen, that they did not want to stay in, yet they felt they had no other option and they had no other recourse. And I think that's the scary part to us, because, and this maybe exposes my own prejudice. I just assumed that a lot of these they were hooked on drugs, so they were just prostituting for drugs. You know, they were just the crackhead. They were the ones that were just in that lifestyle, and they'd made bad choices in their younger years. But when we began to get to know some of these people, that's when we found out a lot of them did not have the choices that I thought that they had.
Not only, Beverly, one of the things you mentioned, I want to follow up real quick on that. One of the things that you mentioned was this sense of feeling worthless and so forth. I think what you just described is not only did they feel worthless, but we saw them as worthless.
That's right.
Is that what I'm hearing?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, and I think it is key too, Jonathan, and I really do think it's key that people even understand what sex trafficking is. Because a lot of people say, well, we have prostitution going on, but they're not understanding that I would say over 90% of what we call prostitution going on here in North Carolina, there's some kind of sex trafficking involved. So I think for your viewers, it's very important for them to even understand what sex trafficking is. So sex trafficking is when there is force involved, and we talk about force being like the white van that comes up into the neighborhood and they snatch your daughter or someone from you. Right.
A big beep on the media.
And we have some of that going on, but that is not the majority of our cases here in North Carolina. What we have a lot of is you've got force, you've got coercion and fraud. Coercion and fraud. And Jonathan's going to share with you just a little bit about what that coercion and fraud looks like. And then you have where the law says that anybody under the age of 18 that is exchanging sex for anything. They may be exchanging sex for tennis shoes. They may be exchanging sex for food. They may be exchanging sex to help mom, because she's a single mom, pay for the rent. But if they're under the age of 18 and they're exchanging sex for anything, that is automatically sex trafficking. And so that is a key component there. And then you have the coercion and the fraud. So,
and this is, I think, where a lot of people really don't comprehend what's going on. This is where I was ignorant as well. You know, as we began to work with law enforcement and the SBI, the special cases and so forth, the reality of the coercion, it looked different than what I thought it was, because again, these traffickers are master manipulators. They will tell you everything that you want to hear. They'll give you the affirmation that you need. They'll tell you that you're loved. And many of them believe that the one who's trafficking them is their boyfriend, is the one who loves them. And yet they're the very ones that are pimping them out again and again and again. I mean, we had one case several months ago where we had the girl, she was having sexual propositions. She had over, 580 propositions over a few week period. And so it was just a shocking reality, but yet she still thought this person loved her.
And I think about, while you're stopping right there, I think about the one girl that was at our safe house, and she was seeking affirmation, because what it is these young girls, they're wanting to feel loved by someone, and how she she had the words ugly and fat carved into her, and then she met somebody online, and that's how they can easily get pulled into that.
We'll take a quick break. We'll be back in a moment, ladies and gentlemen. Stay tuned. Call a friend. We're talking about human trafficking. In essence, we're talking about slavery. We'll be back in a moment.
Experiencing slow internet? If you have a fast internet package, the problem is most likely your wireless router. With more devices using Wi-Fi, your wireless router may not be able to deliver the speed and coverage you need. We now have the leading solution to enhance your internet experience. Using small devices in a mesh network, these Wi-Fi appliances cover just about any size home, so that all your devices can operate to their fullest potential. Whole home Wi-Fi from Star Communications. Get the most out of your internet connection.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. I want to thank you for being with us today. We're talking with Beverly Weeks and Jonathan Chavous. Did I say that right,
yes.
Jonathan? Okay. And we're talking about something that I'm going to read this definition for you. This comes from the Department of Administration here in North Carolina. It says, human trafficking is one of the fastest growing crimes in the United States. The prevalence of human trafficking in North Carolina is due to many factors, including the major highways that run through our state, 40, 85, 95, a large transient military population surrounded by sexual-oriented businesses, numerous rural agricultural areas with a high demand for cheap labor, and increasing number of gangs. That's a government message on the website. You guys know it well. We've talked in this first segment a bit about some of the kinds of things you're seeing. Beverly, I want to go back to you. You talked about being there and seeing that.
Yes.
And I've got to ask the question. I mean, there just seems to be something clearly demonic about this whole process. I don't know how to put it in any other word, but this sense of where you've been and what you've seen. How do you deal with that on a daily basis?
So, that I would say that's the number one question we get answered all the time, is like, why would you leave the safety of your own home? Because we both have kids. I have 2 kids. Jonathan has 5 children. why would you leave that comfort? Why would you leave that safety? And, you know, I remember, Jonathan, specifically when you and I started working in sex trafficking years ago, that we were in a meeting and you were just angered at the meeting that there were so many people talking about human trafficking and sex trafficking, nobody wanting to say, we'll go out and do the rescues. And I remember you hitting your hand on the table, walking out and saying, come on, we're going to actually put our words to action. We're going to do something about it.
Yeah, we were just tired of sitting in a meeting and let's talk about it. Let's form some kind of plan for 3 years from now, and maybe we'll get some funding towards it in a grant. And our thing was, you know, we can begin to do things right now. We don't need a grant. We can just begin to put, you know, the people that we know, make them aware, and just tell them, hey, we're going to go after this, and just trust the Lord to take care of the rest. And really, He's provided for us to be able to go out and do the things that we're doing. But like she mentioned, the fear is something that people always ask. Aren't you afraid to do that? Why would you do that? And the answer always comes back to, if my daughter was in a situation where I couldn't get up with her and I didn't know where she was at, and somehow she had made some decisions and other people had made some other decisions that had affected her life, I would want somebody to be there. And so it came to a place, I think, for me on a moral standard of, you know what, I feel a responsibility before God to step out into these communities, to meet these people, and to offer hope in those situations.
Because we always say, these are somebody's daughters out there. These are somebody's granddaughters. These are somebody's sons, and these are somebody's grandsons. And if we don't go, who will? But in answer to your question, yes, you know, but we can't operate off of fear, but there's always, you know, I think about the sting we were on just a few weeks ago, because Jonathan and I, we work closely with law enforcement agents. We also work with the SBI, we work with the lawyers, judges, the judicial system, we work with detectives. Most of the time when we're doing a rescue, somebody knows where we are and our whereabouts. But, you know, would you feel fear if you walked into the room and there was a pimp with a gun? Or honestly, I fear the needle just as bad as the gun. You know, you can walk into a hotel room. We do hotel outreach every single week across eastern North Carolina, where we go into different hotels, and merely, again, it's to establish the relationship with these girls and these guys. And I want to make sure, Jonathan, that we are stressing that it's not just women that are being rescued out of sex trafficking, but it's guys as well.
Yes, we've actually helped rescue 3 gentlemen just in the last year and a half. And that was another surprising thing for us as well, because I just didn't think that was a big of issue as it was. But there are gangs that are involved in this. There are all kinds of, even the drug cartel are moving people through our counties and so forth. And traffickers have become so smart on how they move the survivor or the victims that they're very hard to catch. In fact, statistically, they say it's more likely for a trafficker to be struck by lightning than to be arrested and convicted of a crime of sex trafficking. Most of the time, we get them for drugs, or we'll get them for other types of crimes. But it's so hard to prove it, and part of the reason is because you've got the eyewitness people that would actually testify are scared. Yes. They're scared. They've been abused. They've experienced trauma at a level that we can never comprehend.
So part of that victimization then makes your job even harder, because even if you see it and identify it, you got to have somebody to come forward and say there's a crime here.
Yeah, that's
most
right.
definitely. And these girls, their minds are being played with. You know, that's part
They're
of that
completely
coercion and
brainwashed.
part of that fraud.
One of the things that we saw that the traffickers were doing is they would actually dress guys up in police uniforms, clergy uniforms. They would put them in all kinds of different things and have them come in there and repeatedly rape these girls initially when they brought them in, on top of drugging them. So they're having the effects of the drugs, then every place of violation. So who can you trust? And like she mentioned before, a lot of times we've discovered that a lot of times it's a family member or a close family friend that is the initial one who brings them into the trafficking world. And so it's not the stranger like we think. It's a small percentage that it's the stranger, but it's somebody in your local circles that they may look like you. They may look like me and Beverly, but yet they're involved in a whole nefarious underground world that we're completely unaware of.
Beverly, I read on your blog an example of what Jonathan was talking about, in which they were talking about this young girl that the father had sexually abused and attempted to several times, and this was on your blog. And the more I read, I found it not only captivating, but it started saying to me how little people know about the victimization and how deep and where these threads run.
Most definitely, and that's what you were just sharing, is that a lot of these, and we prefer to call them survivors and not victims, but a lot of these survivors, they know they're predators. They know the people that are introducing them into sex trafficking. What is so sad right now is we know that there's an opioid crisis across our country. There's a drug epidemic going on in every county. Even here in Clinton. And, you know, Jonathan, we have to be real. We're seeing sex trafficking all over North Carolina. And a lot of it's poverty, drugs, and I believe you will hear a lot more cases of parents actually putting their children out there on escort services and trafficking out their children in exchange for drugs.
Knowing the horrific things that's going to happen to them.
Yes.
As you said, repeat. Unlike a drug, they can use them and use them.
That's right.
Yes. So we go into those hotels weekly. We go into hotels, we'll go into a strip club, we'll go on the streets, we'll go anywhere that we are made aware where there is prostitution and high drug activity. Again, I'm not there to report the crime or
gather evidence.
Yes. What I want to do, my main focus is to build relationships with these men and these women to get them to safety.
Is that not rather unique, though, Beverly, to approach it in that way that you're doing? Is kind of creative and unique within itself.
It is. I mean,
I think it is. I think the biggest issue is trust.
yes.
I mean, for any type of gathering of information or helping them come to a place where they feel like they can tell you what's going on and get them to a place of safety. Because, you know, we can't force someone who's in trafficking to go to a safe house that we have. We can't, I mean, we'll be doing the same thing that traffickers are doing,
that's
right?
right.
And so we don't want to violate that place. And so it's going in and building trust with them. And I think a lot of people just think, well, it's just too hard or it's too difficult. But, you know, when people genuinely care, genuine, authentic love, it resonates. And people know, oh, you don't have another agenda. We're not here because we're getting some kind of money to do this. I mean, we're not getting paid extra to come out here and to go and put our lives in danger. That we're doing this because we genuinely care and we want to see your life changed. And that's the same with our jail ministry, because one of the things that we discovered was when we were going to our hotels that a lot of these young ladies and young men that were in trafficking, they were being arrested for petty crimes, for stealing, for drug bust. And this is where the traffickers are really smart. They're getting these girls and guys that they're pimping out to do the crimes for them so that they never touch the drugs. They never touch they're never breaking into the houses. They're not doing any of those things. They're getting them to do it. And that's part of that coercion piece that we were talking about earlier. Then they can say, see, I had this evidence. I videotaped you selling that drug, or I videotaped you stealing that. And so if you ever report it, you're going to jail for a long time.
So that's the psychological bondage.
Yes,
that's right.
Yes. And so we found out a lot of these girls that we were going in to meet in the hotels, houses, on the streets, wherever, were ending up in the jail. So we actually went to our sheriff in our county, which will go into any county.
That was in Wayne County.
Yes.
That's right.
So in Wayne County, we went to our sheriff and said, look, we want to start going into the jails, because that is an opportune time for us to get these survivors away from the pimps, away from the drug dealers, continue our relationship with them. So we do that. We go in, we offer life skill classes, we do parenting classes, we do math, English, music, any kind of life skill classes in the jail. And it also gives us an opportunity to do intake forms on every single inmate so that we can know what is their past. Have they ever been sexually exploited? Have they ever been raped? Have they ever been molested? Things that would contribute, or factors, ACEs factors that would lead us to believe that that young woman or that young man is actually a survivor of sex trafficking. So that's been a key component of our outreach, being able to go into those jails and being able to get the survivors straight from the jails when they leave and take them straight to their safe house. And we actually have multiple safe houses that we work with across North Carolina and across our country. And then Jonathan and I have a safe house as well. Cry Freedom Missions also has a safe house at an undisclosed location where we could actually take the survivors there for emergency housing and then transfer them all across North Carolina with True Justice International, Anna's Place, Lily Pad Haven, just different places where we can put survivors at.
We're going to take another break. When we come back, I want to dig a little bit deeper and talk a bit about some of these crimes, quote, that may not be directly related to the person, and how do we deal with that, and what does people need to report? What are those things that folks, when they see it, need to look for? I think that's part of this, hopefully, message that we're sending out. Not only, obviously, you've convinced a lot of people that there's a problem here and has been for some time, but let's talk about what we can do about it. Maybe not necessarily going into the motels, but there may be some other things we can do.
Right.
Ladies and gentlemen, we'll be back in a moment. Call a friend, stay tuned. We're talking about human trafficking. In essence, we're talking about a new form of modern slavery. You need to know more about this. Stay tuned.
You come out to replace a bad sensor, and that has a 5-year commitment to my contract, and you don't tell me? Here's your sign.
Switch to the sign that's keeping homes secure and customers happy all over the area. Security from Star Communications. We pride ourselves on fair pricing and quick, friendly service every time.
Somebody trying to break into this place?
Security from Star Communications.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. We Should Know is on there. I want to thank you for being with us today. My name is J.W. Simmons, and we have two guests that is something that is probably deep, and if this show don't move you today, then you might want to check your pulse or something, because we're talking about something that's vital, not only to you, but to the future, literally to the future of our society, and that's the well-being and health of our younger population. And Beverly Weeks, you've been involved in this. You're an author. You've been speaking about this for some time. You've taken somewhat of a unique approach. Jonathan Chavous, you've been out there. You've been all over the world looking at this kind of thing. We're now right here talking about in eastern North Carolina. This show is heard probably 8 or 10 counties and multiple counties on the TV side. If you're listening today, we're going to give out some phone numbers. You're going to tell folks how they can engage you and get involved. The idea of looking at Cry Freedom missions and what you're doing with that is phenomenal. I dare say a lot of people were probably scratching their heads and saying, why haven't I heard about this more? Why hasn't been more information about it? Part of it is just the fact that this is something that is what I like to call it's the seething underbelly of evil.
That's right.
And it's there. And sometimes when you walk into a place, I'm sure both you guys could walk into the same hotel lobby or the same room as someone watching, and you would see 50 or 60 different things. Other folks might walk in and see the coffee machine or something else, but because they hadn't been keyed to look for it.
That's right.
What do you look for? And once you see something, how do you get somebody's attention? I mean, we all know to call 911 if somebody's screaming and begging for help.
Sure.
But that's not always the case, is it?
No, well, in any place that they feel like there's something going on, it's important to contact your local law enforcement. I would definitely say, hey, I'm seeing something here. Could you mind just bringing an officer by just to check it out? Yeah. We don't want to ignore those gut instincts, because oftentimes we'll drive and something just doesn't fit right, and we don't know why. And I think oftentimes that's the Lord, making us aware of things. But I believe that, just go ahead and make your law enforcement know. It may be something that they're already aware of. It may be something, an area that they're already patrolling and looking at things. And so that just helps them to realize, okay, this is a place that's going.
Plus you get a more immediate response.
Correct.
Yes.
And so always involve the local law enforcement.
Yes, and I think, Jonathan, that we as parents have got to be more, take a bigger responsibility in this. I think that we as parents have to put boundaries in place. When you think about trafficking and you maybe think about prostitution, the older generation, we may think about the movie Pretty Woman and her standing on the streets, Julia Roberts, and just holding her thumb out.
Absolutely.
Prostitution and trafficking is not done that way anymore, Jonathan. A lot of it is done online. It's done, through all these social media pages, through Instagram, through Snapchat, all these different ways that these predators are drawing in our kids, even for gaming systems. I think about Fortnite, I walked in on my son the other night, and I walked in and he was talking to somebody, and I'm like, who is he talking to? You know, he was talking about to 4 or 5 people at one time, and then they were hearing the conversations that we were having. And I just think we as parents, because we're oblivious, we think, well, this is not going to happen to my child. These women that we are rescuing, I want to let you know that one of these girls, her father was an attorney. Okay, so we are not just talking about your poor, underprivileged children, but we are talking about our children getting sucked into these predators.
It covers all socioeconomic.
Yes.
It really does.
Yes.
That's right.
And because trafficking is done more online now, and part of that is because our pornography issues that are taking place, it's so easily accessible. We got kids that are looking at pornography 6, 7, 8 years old because it's there. It's present, and sometimes it's done, you know, on accident. Other times you've got other kids that are encouraging the other kids to look at this, and then we've got issues that, you know, I didn't even have a cell phone. We didn't even have cell phones when I was in school, you know, and now all of a sudden they can take a picture, they can talk to people all over the world within seconds. And
who ever heard of the word sexting 20 years ago?
Correct.
Nobody ever heard of that.
And so their brains are not developed to the place to even recognize that this could be serious issues. Well, everybody else is doing that, or they're on Snapchat, everybody else is, and so we'll friend this person and friend this person. One of the things that I tell the kids when we go into the schools is I say to them, listen, never send a picture to anybody that you wouldn't send to your grandma. And that always gets a good response in the crowd. You know, they're always like, "Ooh, wait a second."
Grandmas are clapping out there.
You can see their minds turning because almost every one of them sent something they wouldn't.
Yeah.
And don't ever send a message that you wouldn't send your grandma.
That's right.
And they're like, "Oh." And then another thing is I always encourage, and this is the rule in my house as well, is you're not allowed to have any friends on social media that you've not met in person and know them. And that eliminates that place of that individual trafficker. And so, because they'll come in there and they'll put their face, a 15-year-old boy or a 16-year-old girl, and they'll create these conversations. And so putting those boundaries. In my case, at my home, we just removed all the social media apps. The TikTok, the Snapchats, the Instagram, we removed it all because the shocking thing, we had been in a training with the FBI several months back, and they'd given us some of the usernames of known traffickers, and I went home that evening just curious, pulled up my daughter's Snapchat and found 2 of them on that list, on her friends list.
And these are predators.
And these are predators, yes.
You know, I think about in one of your earlier segments that we did with you, we were talking about one of the young women that we did have at our safe house that we had partnered with True Justice. And I remember she had met a gentleman on social media. And again, remember we talked earlier about affirmation, how women want affirmation. They're seeking to be loved. Some of them have fathers that are missing from the home.
It's part of the nature.
Yes, and so in her case, she was just wanting to feel loved. She met a young man on social media, and they began to establish that relationship because you discussed that earlier, how it may take 6 months before a predator draws somebody in. But he was like, you know, you're beautiful. He was telling her everything she wanted to hear. And then he said, why don't you just meet me at such and such hotel and let's just talk. And so she met him. And when she met him at the hotel, he slipped in. He offered her something to drink, whether it be Coke, Mountain Dew, whatever. And then he just popped a little substance into her drink. She passed out. When she passed out, that is when he brought the men in to have sex with her. One right behind the other. They would pay to have sex with her. Now, when she woke up, how do you think that made her feel? Even more demoralized, even more insecure about herself, feeling like she's worthless, she's useless, that nobody will ever understand, that she could never be forgiven.
And
so what does she do? She continues in the lifestyle because, again, she knows no different unless she is shown different. And that's why we want to go into these hotels, we want to go into these jails, we want to go into these strip clubs, we dare to go on the streets to build a relationship. Sometimes it could take us 6 months to build a relationship with someone before they say, I trust you enough, Mr. Jonathan, to let you get me to a safe house.
And even with that, sometimes it can take 4 or 5 times of transporting there, them running away.
Yes.
And doing it again and again because they have been so trained through all the psychological abuse and all the physical abuse, the emotional abuse, the sexual abuse, that, oh, I really can't trust anybody. And it could be something small that triggers them. I mean, we had one instance where they just simply fed some corn to one of the girls. And it was something that had happened when she was being trafficked, that they had mixed corn with urine and made her eat it. And so when she heard that corn, and that was what was going to be on the table for dinner that night, she flipped out.
She ran. PTSD, the trauma, everything came back, and she just flipped out and she ran.
And that was the shocking thing. One of the counselors talked to us about this aspect of post-traumatic stress that these girls were under. And she said it's likened, if they've been in trafficking for 2 years, it's likened to a gentleman being in war for 40. And so we know the effects just because we have a military base there, and East North Carolina has got bases all over. We know the effects of what it's like for a gentleman that's been in battle in Afghanistan or Iraq for 12 months or 16 months or a year or so. We've seen the effects that it's had on them coming back and just getting into society. Imagine doing that for 40 years, that kind of impact. And so I think that's part of the thing that we don't quite understand, because when I first got into it, I thought, well, why don't these girls just report it? Why don't they just run away? Why don't they just escape? Why don't they get away? But it's this type of trauma that so shuts them down that they don't have the ability to even think clearly. Their whole mind is in chaos. Their life feels like it's clouded, and they don't really see, who can I trust? What can we do? And so that's part of the thing that we're trying to do, is build that trust, show that genuine love, and even if they fail, even if they go back, we're still saying we're here for you, and we'll walk this out, whatever it takes. And I think it's that level of trust and the continual hope that we believe you're worth something.
So this mental bondage and this building up of this mental bondage is something that could take years to work a person out.
Yes.
And we're a society of quick fixes.
That's right.
When you start talking about years.
Right. You're talking about a person who maybe has been addicted to drugs for 10, 11, 15. You don't know how many years they've been addicted. And you're expecting them to just break free out of their bondage within 6 months. It's not going to happen.
I mean, they've created entire lifestyle habits, ways of doing things inside this dysfunction. And so when you take all that away, they're completely stripped of how they're normal. Even though to us it looks absolutely chaotic, it's their normal. And so we're rebuilding them from the ground up, so to speak. And it's having that patience and that care. So we have counselors, trauma-informed counselors. We have people that are constantly there helping them walk that out. And most of the time, what we do is we encourage them, if they've been on drugs, and almost 95% of them have, because traffickers use that to control them.
Yes.
We try to get them into rehab for at least 6 months so they have tools that they need to be able to overcome their addiction. And then we want to put them into those safe houses where they receive the sexual healing that they need, the trauma healing that they need, and we offer them to be able to stay there up to 2 years. And then after that, we then have like halfway homes to reintroduce them to be able to take on jobs. And that's where we're employing them through the Cry Freedom Mission shop. We're trying to get them job skills so that as they develop certain areas to work in society like normal people, then we can say, hey, you know what, we've got this other business that partners with us and they've got a job and we feel like you're ready for that and we want to help get you in that position.
This is phenomenal when you think about what our listeners are hearing, and what we're discussing today is something that's really tearing away at the very fabric of what we are as a society. So as we come to the last segment today, I want to make sure that we touch on any particular point that from your perspective you feel like we need to definitely make sure folks know, because there's so many pieces to this. We're talking a novel here. We're not talking a short story. So we're going to take another break and we'll be right back. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for being with us. We're coming up on our last segment. We want to thank you for listening to Jonathan Chavous and Beverly Weeks. We're talking about human trafficking, something near and dear to everyone's heart. Stay tuned. Call a friend. We'll be right back.
To get the most out of your electronic devices, you need a strong internet connection and a protected home Wi-Fi network. You need high-speed internet from Star. Star has the fastest, most affordable high-speed internet service available for all your devices. We have no long-term contracts or high-pressure sales. Our service speaks for itself, and switching is hassle-free. We take care of everything with free installation from a local company. High-speed internet from Star. Internet at the speed of life.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. We Should Know is on air. We're talking about human trafficking today. For my definition, I'm saying modern day slavery. We're talking with Beverly Weeks and we're talking with Jonathan Chavous, and you guys, I'm going to use the phrase here, Cry Freedom Missions, which is a part of your organization that deals directly with this human trafficking issue. We've covered this subject in years past. You're doing something unique. From a law enforcement perspective, I call it kicking the door in and going in where it's at. You're literally going into the hotels. You're reaching out to people. You're putting your arms around people and trying to bring them close. Others wouldn't even be in the area, as you pointed out, Jonathan. How does folks help, Beverly? Is there, if somebody's listening to this and says, you know, I'd love to get them to come and talk to our youth group or what have you. Is that even possible? And how do they get up with you?
And I think it is so important. That is one of the key ways that you can help, because our main 3 goals we have a focus, and that is to reach, rescue, and restore survivors. And you may not want to go out to a hotel with me in the middle of the night at 2 o'clock to rescue a girl out of sex trafficking. You may not want to face a pimp or to face a drug dealer. But the things that you can do for us is education is key. And so Jonathan and I travel all across North Carolina, and I say North Carolina, but literally it's all across the country, doing education within churches. We go into schools, because this is really a mandate in our high schools, is to educate on sex trafficking. That is a key component of the sex education curriculum throughout our state. So Jonathan and I, we train teachers, we go in, we speak to students, we speak to guidance counselors. We just did a conference for guidance counselors, churches. We are in a different church every single Sunday, and by both of us doing ministry and both being ordained ministers, we usually deliver a service, we deliver a message, and then we incorporate all of these components, because education and awareness is key. And so we would love to come to your business, to come to your school, to come to your church, to help educate on sex trafficking. And you can always reach us at cryfreedommissions.com, cryfreedommissions.com. There's a speaker request down there. And then also you can call our number, 919-583-9330. That's 919-583-9330, and ask to speak with Karen, who's our administrator. And Karen handles all our speaking engagements, all of our conferences, and that kind of thing. But we would love that opportunity, because again, education is key. Education is key.
And then on the other side, you know, they say, well, how can I get in there and help? And so we have a lot of people, they ask, well, how do you fund this stuff? And so we don't have grants. Everything is through private donations.
A nonprofit?
We're a nonprofit. And so everything that we do is through private donors, churches, businesses. And so we you know, you can get involved in that way. Another way that they can get involved is we have ladies that come in and they'll bake cookies for the girls at the safe house. They'll come in and bring clothes. They'll bring different items that need hygiene items. Those are great things. You know, a lot of churches will say, well, we want to do a project. What can we do? And we'll get together like these hygiene packs with some toiletry items, some makeup, different things that they could use. And those are entrance ways when we do our hotel ministry stuff, that when we do outreach there, we can hand them that, or say it's on the streets, or say we're going to a brothel. We can say, hey, we just want to give you these things. We love you. If you ever need us, here's our card.
Hoping that'll open the door.
Yes, it does open the door to get into these hotels, to meet a young girl who's starving because the pimp has not given her any food, and to say, here's your bag of toiletries, here's you some snacks, here's you some bottled water. It opens a door for us to strike up that conversation with her. And then another way that is really helpful, for us to get a girl to safety, just like a couple weeks ago, Jonathan was working with the SBI to get a girl to safety. We got a call that morning. We immediately had to remove her from where she was and to get her to a rehab. That day, when we removed her and got her to a safe house, that one day cost $1,200. It cost $1,200 because we had to put her in a rehab. Rehab for these girls or guys usually cost us between $500 and $700 a month, because we put them in a Christian rehab. Then they have to have clothes, they have to have resources. If they were to leave a child behind, we have to help take care of that child, the other family members. So as a nonprofit, it was draining us dry. We were like, where are we going to come up for the resources for this? So the survivors that we were rescuing, we started teaching them how to make products. We would teach them how to make jewelry. We would teach them how to make bath scrubs. We would teach them how to make salts. And we actually opened a shop in downtown Goldsboro called Cry Freedom Mission Shop, with the dream of empowering, equipping, and employing these survivors. And so we teach them how to make jewelry, and each survivor makes a piece of jewelry. Cool. They take the beads, they string them together, they make jewelry, necklaces, bracelets, and then they have a little tag and they sign it. It says, I am free please pray for me.
All of this is an example
Yes,
of it?
and so we put the jewelry in the shop, and then we sell the jewelry, and we pay the survivors. Jonathan oversees, he's the COO, and so he oversees all the employment of the survivors. The survivors get paid $10 an hour. And then you've got the survivors that live in the safe house. This covers all the needs, all the food, all the clothing, the dental work, because you can imagine the drug abuse on the teeth, on the mouth, on the gums. And so it covers all of that. And so you need to shop Cry Freedom Mission shops in downtown Goldsboro, or go back to online at cryfreedommissions.com, and you can purchase the jewelry actually online.
And have it shipped to
Yeah,
Yes,
absolutely.
yes.
no matter where they're here.
That's right.
Yes, and the great thing about it is by us traveling all across the nation and speaking at these churches, these schools, we bring the product with us also when we come.
That's an outstanding way for people to step up. I mean, who done? I mean, because that's nice looking.
Yes, and we have jewelry for women, jewelry for men. We have leather products that are made by survivors. We have salt scrubs. We have lotions. We have soaps. And what we do is as we are traveling across the country, we will make relationships with the other people who do the same thing we do. And then a lot of them have shops and places to keep their ministries going. And so we partner with them and we sell some of their products. They sell some of our products so that we can all continue to do what we do. Because, Jonathan, there are not very many people out there rescuing survivors.
And we really felt like we want to continue to do what we're doing, and we want to continue to grow what we're doing to be able to help as many people as possible. So we don't want to be dependent on a grant, because grants can change each year. The budget may get cut. It may not pass, like this year when it didn't pass in the state. And so we don't want to be dependent on that. So we wanted to look at how can we create self-sustaining businesses that will promote the cause, help people become aware, and it will be a place of blessing to the women and men that we're rescuing.
So you're located in Wayne County, in Goldsboro, but that's just the station of where you're located. You can transcend on anywhere.
Because our safe house is not in Wayne County.
Okay.
Our safe house is outside of Wayne County. So we have safe houses that are strategically placed that we partner with, and then the one that we own, that Cry Freedom Missions owns, is not even in Wayne County. So we're all across the state. We are not just a Wayne County or a Goldsboro. We've been in Clinton. We've been in the Hispanic camps. We've been in all these different areas all across North Carolina. And like Jonathan said, aside from Five Sparrows, there's Five Sparrows that we work with in Fayetteville. There's some groups in Charlotte. There's True Justice International near the New Bern Moorhead Way and the Merriam that we work with. But there's very few groups out there that are actually doing the rescue.
Jonathan, one of the things you mentioned a while ago that it struck me too, and kind of from a law enforcement perspective, I know we've had conversations with this in that community, the recognition of something that might be off. Oftentimes you see one male individual and there's 3 or 4 younger females, some of them obviously much younger, and he's portraying the role of a father figure, and clearly through mannerisms we can look at things and go, there's something just not right here, because it's too much. Even with that, the first step would be to call 911 and say there's something suspicious going on here.
Yeah, so that's the first step. And then our place of recognizing that it's not just a male. It could be a woman that's trafficking them too. And in fact, oftentimes what's happening is with the traffickers, and this is where they've just become extremely smart in how they maneuver in society, is they will have a girl that they've trafficked for a long, long time and built a place of trust, even as twisted as that sounds, with that one lady, and she becomes the one who directs all the other girls. And so you may never even see that guy dealing with any of the other girls. Yeah. And now today,
especially with gangs.
Now today with technology, we're shocked at the level of movement that's taking place, how they're moving these girls. For example, say a John wants to have a girl for a day. So he will go to this app, he'll pay with his Cash app and say, how I'll get this girl. They'll send him a GPS coordinates. He'll go and pick this girl up at a house. He doesn't know where it's at, it's just this disclosed GPS coordinates. Pick her up, take her to his house. And then the next morning or 2 hours later, some other John will pick her up from that house because he'll have that GPS coordinates. And so the trafficker's never involved. He's just taking the cash. Right? Exactly, and it's almost impossible to catch.
Parents that are traveling and they're taking their children out of country, young girls, other than putting a leash on them or something. How important is it for them to keep their eyes on?
Oh, absolutely.
Yes.
Because that's kind of, for a lot of parents, that's kind of horrifying. going out of the country? How about my...
And
because
not
they
just-
don't see any fear.
Sadly, not just out of the country, but keep your eyes on your surroundings.
Not even for a
everywhere
second.
where your
Not
children
even for a
are.
second. Don't look
Everywhere.
away.
Yes, yes.
Because it's that fast.
Yes.
And you got to realize traffickers are looking for those touristy areas.
And they're watching
And
you.
they are watching
So
you.
wherever you're weak, whatever is deflecting your attention, they're waiting for that
Yes.
moment.
And they love to prey on the vulnerable. The LGBTQ community, just foster children, they love to prey on the vulnerable.
We're going to have to close. Any last minute thing, we've got 919-583-9330. Talk to Karen to book you. Anything else?
No, I just think to get people involved, for them to be aware, for them to have those conversations with their kids, and if they know something that's going on, to not be silent, to speak up. Because if we will all begin to speak up in these situations, then guess what? The traffickers are going to realize, oh, it's not safe to be here.
And kind of that idea that you mentioned of being conscious of the environment and react. I mean, if you don't do anything but dial 911, and I think you mentioned this, Beverly, is that if you have your children, you can't take your eyes off that child for 15 seconds or 10 seconds. It's that long. So thank you for being with us. We look forward to supporting you any way we can in the future. And thank you for the service you're rendering to our communities. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for being with us today. We continue to tell you, send us your comments to weshouldknowedu@gmail.com. And as always, may God bless.
Thank you for tuning in to this week's episode of We Should Know with host J.W. Simmons. If you have a question, comment, or suggestion regarding this or any episode, please send your emails to weshouldknowedu@gmail.com. And remember to tune in every Tuesday at 2:30 for another informative episode of We Should Know.